I'd like to welcome Congressman Andrew Clyde to the program. Republican representative from Georgia's 9th Congressional District, Congressman Clyde graduated from Notre Dame's Navy ROTC and served honorably in the United States Navy as an officer in naval aviation units as well as the Seabees for 28 years. During that time, he made 3 combat deployments to both Iraq and Kuwait. He earned multiple medals and honors before retiring with the rank of commander in 2013. However, beyond his exemplary record of service and leadership, in 1991, he started a little hobby gun shop business in his garage when he got his FFL. That's his federal firearms license to sell firearms for profit to the uninitiated. Since then, he has successfully grown that garage business into a brick and mortar mini empire spanning 2 locations, more than 25 employees, and well into the 8 figures of annual revenue. No small accomplishment. Congressman Clyde was elected in 2020 after winning a 9-way Republican primary contest. Notably for our audience, in February 2023, Congressman Clyde co-sponsored a bill to make the AR-15 the national gun of the United States. So, Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Well, Tom, it's a pleasure to be with you.
So, I just want to start off by asking you, what does the Second Amendment mean to you?
It means freedom and liberty. In fact, I'll tell you the motto. I'm a federal firearms licensee. The motto of my business, I thought about a lot, and it is: we enable individual participation in the preservation of liberty, because that's what federal firearms licensees do, and they enable individuals to possess firearms so they can individually protect and defend liberty. And that's what that's what the Second Amendment is about. The First Amendment is the most powerful amendment in the Constitution. Words are the most powerful things we've got, but those have to be protected by the Second Amendment, because otherwise we'll lose the First Amendment. If we didn't have a Second Amendment, we would eventually lose the First Amendment.
Absolutely, and that's very well put, and I can absolutely sign off on that without hesitation. Let me ask you this, though, because I know a common question that I get from my viewers, and I'm sure that as somebody who was just elected into Congress a few short years ago now, 2020, and assumed office in 2021, something that we all see is that it seems like, particularly when it comes to Republicans, folks are warriors in the campaign trail, and then they turn into kittens in D.C. What is it about Washington, D.C., sir, that seems to do this to people? And as an add-on to that, do you think that there's a good portion of Republicans who, for lack of a better way of putting it, are just faking it when it comes to their 2A support, unlike yourself?
Well, I'll tell you, that is one of the grave concerns that we have up here. Members of Congress get here and they're all fired up to change things, and they realize that they are 1/2 of 1% of what it takes to actually get something done. And so they conform into that cabal of the establishment, in order to do something. And the establishment simply takes control of them, and they no longer then fight for what they were, told their constituents they would do on the campaign trail. We see it a lot. So you've got to be able to hold your conservative values up here. And when people really think about, hey, it's more important that I get reelected than I do what I really said I would do, then that's a real problem. And for me, it's like, I've got values. I'm going to stick to my values. I'm going to fight for my values. If my district wants to reelect me, then great. I will be reelected. But if they don't, then I'll go back home and sell guns.
Do you think that something like term limits would result in more effective advocacy for issues such as the Second Amendment?
I would say that term limits have a good side to them, and they have a bad side. If the term limits are the correct length of term, then I think that they're effective. They would be effective. But if you see what kind of is out there right now, the pledge that people want you to sign on to, which is like 6 years in the House and 12 years in the Senate, well, that's unbalanced, and therefore it would actually hurt representation here in Congress, because the House members, which are the most accountable to the people because we're reelected every 2 years, as opposed to the Senate, which is every 6 years, then you would be limiting the House to half the amount of time. And basically, one senator is worth 4 members of the House to begin with. So they're more powerful individually than the House members are. So it would have to be balanced terms, years of terms, actually, I should say, years of service, in order for that to be effective. And the larger our government grows, the more time it takes to understand the nuances of it and to work effectively in it. So that's an issue as well. So if you're going to limit members, then you also need to be able to limit staff, or what's going to happen is you're going to simply rotate members through and the staff stays the same. You don't have representative government, you have staff running the government, unelected staff.
Right. You get the fourth estate bureaucracy like what we see with the 438 or so agencies and sub-agencies across the United States. And rest assured, I do want to get to the ATF with you. I absolutely loved what you were doing with Mr. Stephen Dettelbach going back to the pistol brace thing, which if you did not hear the news, we now have a pause coming out of the Northern District Court of Texas that has stayed and enjoined the pistol brace rule in its entirety, thanks to the hard work of not only the Firearms Policy Coalition, but also the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. So I just had to take a moment to plug those two entities. I know that's something you definitely took Mr. Dettelbach to task for on behalf of the millions and millions and millions of pistol brace owners. So I wanted to take a moment to publicly, on behalf of everyone, thank you for that. I want to go back to part of that question, though, which was what percentage, if you had to hazard a guess, about what percentage of Republicans do you think behind closed doors, you know what, they make the right mouth noises when it comes to support for the Second Amendment and all that kind of stuff, but they just don't have the fire, they don't have the heart, they're not really interested in it behind closed doors in D.C.?
Well, it's really hard to put a percentage on it, but I'll tell you that if you look at the pistol brace and how many actually co-sponsored that bill, we had about 190 members that co-sponsored that bill and 30 members that wouldn't. So you can look at that and say, okay, so you're maybe 85%, super strong or strong almost members. And then you've got, 15% or so that are, very moderate when it comes to the Second Amendment. Now you've got a couple of Democrats that actually would vote more often with the Republicans, probably maybe 2 to 5, I would say, on the Democrat side. So very, very few. You're talking 2% maybe of the Democrats that would be, that are really pro Second Amendment, but they're not very strong at all. They're probably not as strong as the weakest Republicans. So it's got to really be something that impacts them, and for them to stand on that issue, or stand for that issue, I should say. So I don't really think we have a true majority of strong Second Amendment folks in Congress, and that's why things are difficult. But with enough work, we've been able to pass the pistol brace Congressional Review Act resolution here in Congress, and it passed with 2 Democrats and most of the Republicans. So I think we lost a few Republicans on that, 2 or 3, 4. But so it was done in a bipartisan way, which was good, sent a great signal to the Senate. But even there were no Senate Democrats that were willing to stand for the Second Amendment. So that did not pass in the Senate. And so it didn't even get to Biden's desk for signature. But as you said, it's the court that has truly helped us. But what we did in the House by passing it is we did send a message to the court system that said the House will not stand for the ATF's unconstitutional rule. And I think that has played a significant part in these court decisions that you see coming down on the side of the people and against the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. So I think passing in the House was very, very important.
Absolutely. And I want to take a moment just to touch on this, since you brought up your colleagues from across the aisle, the Democrats. There's obviously, as you just mentioned, only a few of them are willing to jump on board when it came to the pistol brace issue. We do see a growing number of left-wing groups and individuals across the country beginning to adopt and wake up to the power, strength, and frankly, the reasons behind the Second Amendment. I've had it estimated to me that, and I'm not saying I agree with this estimate, but I've had it estimated to me that probably somewhere in the next 10 to 15 years that the Democrats are going to become much more pro-gun. Obviously, from where we sit right now, that's difficult to imagine, but I'm wondering from your area, from where you are, from your view in D.C., sir, do you think there's more quiet support of the Second Amendment among elected Democratic members? And just due to party pressure, donor pressure, whatever the case may be, they're reluctant to vote that way or speak out? Or is pretty much what you see is what you got?
No, I think what you see is what you got, honestly. They see the Second Amendment as a threat to government overreach. And it is a threat to government overreach. Individual liberty is what this nation was founded upon. And the Second Amendment is there to protect individual liberty. And so that is why it is so critically important. And that is why when Congress refuses to go along with the idea of limiting the Second Amendment freedoms, then you have President Biden using his pen through things like redefining definitions that already exist in law, which is a terrifying thing. When you can actually do that and get away with it, then you're basically legislating from the executive branch. They're taking both the executive branch authority and the legislative branch authority. If you can redefine a definition, then you can make it mean anything you want if you get away with it. And then after redefining definitions, then you've got the ability to simply, the rules, rewrite a rule and make it and have it fly. And that, when Congress doesn't have the ability through the Congressional Review Act to strike down a rule, or when the president has to sign the bill that strikes down the rule, when he's the one who actually told the agency to write the rule or agrees with the rule, then you're in a no-win situation. You're kind of catch-22. So it makes it very, very difficult. It puts all the power in the executive branch, and that's not the way our government is designed. You don't really have the balance of power there, the equalization. So the executive becomes very, very strong, and that's very, very dangerous, especially when they want to get rid of the Second Amendment. I firmly believe they do.
Hopefully you're enjoying this conversation with Congressman Clyde. If you are, be sure to show your support not only for the Second Amendment, but for Congressman Clyde by hitting that like button, and comment if you want him back, as well as any other questions that, if we are able to lure him back on, you'd love to see me ask him. So I look forward to seeing that in the comments section. Back to the interview. You mentioned one of the reasons why certain individuals and maybe animating forces behind those individuals may want to get rid of the Second Amendment, or why they see it as a threat, basically being one of the final checks, as it were, against government overreach. Do you think that's the main reason why people are anti-Second Amendment, or do you really think that it seems pretty clear to me that they think they're the good guys? I don't think that there's intentional malice, let's put it that way. They think that they are actually the good guys and we're the bad guys. And when I say we, I mean whoever it is that supports the Second Amendment. What do you think the end game is here? Total disarmament a la certain countries around the world? And if so, to what specific end?
Oh, absolutely. Total disarmament is the end goal here. And I think that, the reason is that they want socialism. They want government to control. And you can't have total government control when people can defend themselves, when they can defend those liberties through a constitutional right to keep and bear arms. But I think a lot of the folks that are anti-Second Amendment are not necessarily thinking that far ahead. I think really the government has used the fear tactic of, quote, mass shootings, if you will, of oh no, if guns are out there, if we eliminate guns, then we're going to eliminate this threat. Well, that's simply not true. Someone who's going to break the law and and kill people and murder people, they don't care what law exists, and they'll always find a way to find a firearm. That's just, they'll steal it. They'll take it from a law enforcement officer. I mean, you name it. They'll figure out a way to get a firearm, and they'll figure out a way to create the carnage that they want to do because they're criminal, and criminals don't obey the law. Law-abiding citizens do, and they are our best and final defense against criminal activity and against the overreach of government, which is why the government is terrified of unarmed citizenry.
Speaking of people who don't obey the law, that seems like a good segue to talk about the ATF. How do we rein in the ATF? I mean, what they've done with pistol braces is absurd. I mean, I think that's a good place to start, but by no means a good place to end. Just realistically, what can we do? I mean, it seems like, you have individuals on the left who wants to defund the police. We've got a lot of folks in the pro-2A world who want to defund the ATF. Isn't the ATF like a good compromise spot where we can start of like, well, let's start with defunding them and we'll kind of see where it goes?
Well, that's a great place to start because I have found out in my 3 years being here that the only thing that executive agencies listen to in Washington, D.C. is money. When you cut their budgets, you get their attention. And that is what we are going to do. The current appropriation, and I'm on the Appropriations Committee, and I'm actually on the Commerce, Justice, Science Subcommittee, which has authority over the budget for the Department of Justice, of which the ATF is a part. So defunding them, as in cutting their budget, is the place to start. And then you do what's called limitation amendments within the appropriation, and that limits their ability to spend money on certain things. Like, for example, if we had not been successful in the court on the pistol brace so far, there is a limitation amendment in the appropriation for the Department of Justice that says no funds may be spent on enforcing the Biden rule, the Biden executive order, or the ATF rule, rather. So that basically means that it's dead. If the ATF can't spend money on it, then they can't enforce it. They can't, push papers on it. They can't do anything on it because they would be spending money. They'd be spending federal resources, and that would be prohibited in their appropriation bill. So that's where you start right there, and then you go through the authorizing committee, which is the Judiciary Committee, to put language in there that further restricts what the ATF can do. But the smaller they are, the less they can do. And, I've always thought that I want a government so small that it's not worth corrupting.
This was another top viewer question that I promised I'd ask folks of you. National Reciprocity Act or something like that. Realistically, let's just be honest, it's not coming up in the next year. How far out do you think that if we do get a Republican majority, or let's just call it a pro-gun majority, do you think that that's something that's achievable, or is that something that, hey, it's just, again, the political will is not there to do it, even if we have theoretically the numbers on paper?
I think national reciprocity is absolute must. That is something we have to accomplish. Just like having driver's licenses, you have a driver's license in one state, and it is then valid in every other state. You have a carry permit in one state, should be valid in every other state because of the fact that it is a constitutional right. Having a driver's license is not a constitutional right, but the Second Amendment is a constitutional right. So is it going to take a Republican Senate and a Republican executive? Absolutely. We're not going to get it accomplished really any other way. But just like the Hearing Protection Act needs to be passed when we have the House and the Senate and the executive back, as well as a bill that I introduced last year. I haven't introduced it yet, but I will, called the Return Act, and that is repealing excise tax on unalienable rights. Now, our Second Amendment is taxed. If you can tax a constitutional right, then you can eliminate it. As Chief Justice John Marshall in 1819 said, the power to tax includes the power to destroy. So, the Democrats have bills out there that want to increase the excise tax on firearms from 10 or 11%, depending upon the type of firearm, up to 1,000%. Basically eliminating, taking firearms out of the average citizen's ability to afford them. And that's how they would eliminate the Second Amendment, through taxation, which is why we have to eliminate the taxation on the Second Amendment. So I think it's so very, very important, those things. And I believe it would definitely take a full Republican House, Senate, and executive to accomplish them, though.
Well, sir, I want to be respectful of our time limitations here together today, because I know I could honestly sit here asking you questions and chit-chatting for hours. I want to close.
I would enjoy that very much.
Well, if you're up for it, we'll do this again sometime. But I've got one more fun question for you. If you conceal carry, what's your favorite concealed carry gun?
Golly, for what day of the week? I normally carry a 1911 and 45, or either that or like a Smith & Wesson Shield and 9mm. Those two are great carry guns, but those are not all of them. There are many, many more out there, but those are just what I like.
Well, sir, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time to speak to everyone, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you, Tom. Great to be on.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that conversation as much as I did with Congressman Clyde, and we hope to have him back on the show, and I'll let you know after the cameras went off. That might be in the cards at some point in the future. Be sure to show your support for Congressman Clyde as well as the Second Amendment. Hit that like button and comment below some of your questions and things that you'd like to see Congressman answer. Let's close out on our ever popular quote of the day. This one comes from Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. The nearer the man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength. I appreciate you all sticking around this long. I will see you in the comment section and the next video. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.